Okay, so let me finish this. Beautiful day today. Get a chance to meet in your groups. Go out in the hallways, go wherever you want. And we should be able to knock this out in 30 minutes. Okay, so we work from the channel premise that every channel function carries a cost. And that in the decision of make versus buy, we will always consider that costs are valued, that we have to know what they are. But in the trade-off of costs, we should also be able to generate revenues as well. So if we take the make decision, we will have costs that we will have to deal with. If we continue with the buy decision, we will have costs to deal with. And so the most valuable thing that we can do is try to come up with a methodology of deciding which is better. So the first thing we need to know is we need to know the cost of the make decision, the buy decision. And so these are the ways in which we determine how much it costs us to do the buy decision. So the three most common ways of paying in the buy decision are margins, commissions, and royalties. I got a piece of chalk. Okay, there's a chalk over there. Okay. So margins are the difference between the revenue and the cost of goods sold. Accountants abbreviate that as COGS. No, I don't want to do a backup. Leave me alone. Commission is usually a fraction of the retail price. Commissions can be somewhat dangerous because generally commissions may not necessarily change. And what can happen sometimes is that in the decision to boost sales, you do that one marketing P that is the easiest to do, and that is you change the price or drop it, but the commission stays the same, and you might ironically put yourself in a hole and make yourself go from black to red overnight. This is one of the inherent issues. The final is royalty. Royalty is a percentage of the reseller's business. Alec Guinness, way those many years ago, when George Lucas was wanting him to play an obscure role called Obi-Wan Kenobi for Star Wars, Alec Guinness said, this is weird. I don't even understand the role. I'm not even sure I fit. And George Lucas said, and he said, how much? This is a man who did The Bridge on the River Kwai. He did, oh my gosh, Lawrence of Arabia. He's one of the greatest actors of all, British actors of all time. And they're wanting to pay him 50 grand. This is $1970, but still, okay? And so George Lucas in desperation says, I'll give you 2% of the royalties on Star Wars in perpetuity. Yeah, good plan. Now, how much that's worth now to his children?
More than 50,000.
What's that?
More than 50,000.
Yeah, you're darn right. I think it's something like 800 million now, okay? Yeah, they're not hurting, okay, yeah, they're not having any problems. So this is one of the ways that you can do it. So these are the most common ways. However, not everything is perfect. As an entrepreneur, sometimes you have to find more flexible ways to do the buy decision when quite simply you can't pull the money out of your hat. So one way is the lump sum or flat fee. In other words, you pay it down once and you don't have to pay it again. So I work with a company called I Build App, and I build apps for clients, and I have only one client left, but I built apps for Apple and for Google. And man, Apple eats your lunch. I mean, you have to do theirs every year, whereas Google, they had like a 5-year plan. Anyway, I Build App wanted to be able to get into the business fast. So in 2017, they offered developers a $1,500 lump sum to be able to buy in as a developer for perpetuity, and I never have to spend another nickel again. So I just had 2 more apps updated, and they're doing the updating for me. I'm making out like a bandit, all right? So that's an example of when you use a lump sum or a flat fee. It is a way of generating revenues quickly, fast, and getting them off the schneid. The next is what's known as a functional discount. And what the functional discount quite means is I'm only going to pay for the functions. It just sounds like that. All I need you to do is just take care of my expenses. If you take care of the expenses, then hopefully I'll be able to survive and go on. The last is usually future consideration means rights to future businesses. In other words, they're saying, if you stick with me long enough, I promise you that no matter how big I get, you'll get 5% or you'll be my partner for the rest of the life of the business. Other variations are ways that you can negotiate, especially if you're a small player and you need a break. Sometimes it costs you, sometimes much. I mean, I don't think Star Wars is hurting as a franchise because they're giving 2% to Alec Guinness's descendants. So it's a risk, like everything, but that's the way you do business. All right. So remember those things if you ever become an entrepreneur. All right. So those are the ways that you buy in. What you're hoping to do, especially when it comes to the other variations, is be able to have some kind of exchange. So I'm giving you one thing, you're giving back. And that's what reciprocity means. All right. Ergo sum, you do this for me, I will do something for you. Also known as a quid pro quo. So these are the ways that you pay your way into the buy situation. These are the costs as we know them. Having this, however, we still have to consider why we're going into a vertical market, or why we should, okay? Why would we go and do the vertical market thing? It comes down to one major answer and 2 other considerations. Why do you take the risk? Why do you go through it? And why are you willing to be able to take the chance? Remember this. The single greatest reason that you make these changes is to increase your return on investment. ROI. When you go into businesses, I want you to think of return on investment. ROI. So what does that mean? We have three major pieces when it comes to considering return on investment. And it comes down to this. First, we have revenue. These are the total sales generated through your business. Total revenue. The next thing that we have to consider are direct costs. Direct costs are any costs that are directly associated with the production of a given item. I build something. It costs me in raw materials, sub-assemblies, finished goods, the labor to make those things, the salespeople to do that in the staff. All of the things, the costs that are directly associated are considered direct costs. The last is the concept of overhead. And overhead is every other cost that cannot be directly associated with the production of an item. Overhead generally doesn't change whether you produce 0 items or 1 trillion. Overheads are costs such as legal fees, accounting, the cost of land, the renting of the plant. Now, the lighting and the power, that could be associated with a direct cost, and those things are actually split up. And so you'll actually have a power bill associated with doing things that are indirect costs, and you'll have those that are direct. But generally, overhead never changes. So think about this. Revenue minus your direct costs. So let me just draw up a numbers, and I'm just doing this off the top of my head. Let's just use easy numbers. $1,000 in revenue minus $500 in direct costs. And let's say we have $500 in overhead. If we quickly calculate that out, we have a ratio. The ratio is known as efficiency. And when this number, you won't have to know this for the test, just want you to know this as a concept. If this number is over 1, then you can conclude that this is sustainable. In other words, you're recouping your benefits. This formula actually is very valuable. It gives you the ability to measure the make decision versus the buy decision and convert those numbers into a common ratio, excuse me, that helps you decide which one is better, all right? If this number were to drop below 1, basically that means that this is an unsustainable situation. It means that I cannot pay all of the costs that I have. If it is above 1, it means within this snapshot, I can pay for everything. Now, here's what will happen if you use this as a ratio. Let's say in the buy decision, I have certain numbers, okay? It is natural to assume that in the make decision or the vertical market, that your direct costs probably are going to go up. Your overhead costs will probably go up. And once again, I'm being iffy on this. But the hope is that the revenue will go up. What it means also is that once you do the calculations in the in the make decision, that you have a ratio that is comparable to 2 different scenarios, and that's what you want. You want to be able to compare them both And this is why return on investment is such a valuable tool. It allows you to measure unlike situations in a common way and determine which one is better. The primary reason always to make business choices is if they create or increase your return on investment. That's why you're doing business, all right? That's what it means, okay? Now, it's important also to understand is that regardless of the way the situations are, sometimes you can't vertically integrate regardless of how valuable the return on investment is. Remember that all businesses live with limited resources, no matter how big the businesses are. The well is not limitless unless you can print your own money. The second is that your corporation, that simply may not be your corporation's core business. Not only that, but if you're to devote that to another business, it's quite possible that you would exhaust the capabilities of the one that you're making money off of, and unfortunately that'll go out as well. So even if you have advantages that way, there are sometimes fixed positions that force us or just don't elite or just don't give us a choice, okay? Just remember, these three items are the most relevant things, okay? Direct costs, revenues, and overhead. And these are what we use to determine whether or not we should do it. And if you look at this, it's not hard to understand here. If you look at this formula, success means when you drive revenues up and you can drive costs down. Okay. Now, you might actually find very rarely that costs actually go down in a vertical market. It takes very special situations. General rule of thumb is you're going to increase your costs because you're having to do things that you're not used to doing. You've got to perform all 9 channel functions, and each of the channel functions comes with a cost. So there's a pretty good chance that you're going to increase your costs. This is what you're hoping to do. You're hoping to tap into a whole new source and drive that number up, okay? That's the way you make the choice. But here, there's so many good reasons for the the buy decision. So many good reasons that you got to have a darn good reason to try to do it all yourself. The first is, think of your channel partners. They are strongly motivated to provide you with a satisfaction into perpetuity. There's a positive motivation, they get profit. There's a negative motivation, there's a fear of failure. They are always incentivized, generally, to be able to have some good performance, of course, unless there's no competitors. And that's the thing. Competitors drive motivation and all the other factors. If I'm a shipper and I ship and that's all I do, and I have a fleet of 80 trucks, I have 160 drivers, my trucks are on the roads millions of miles every year, I do that every day and I understand it implicitly and I am not distracted by it, I'm a specialist. I'm darn good at what I do. And I know that failure will result with the worries that those things can be done better by my competitors. If you're in business, you thank God for your competition, because your competition always makes you tougher. Steel sharpens steel. If I have 80 trucks and I have 160 drivers, and that's what I've been doing for 20 years, I also have the economies of scale. I can pool demand together in both the upstream, because I can do several manufacturers at a time. I know what it takes to do those shipping. Anybody ever see acetylene bottles, giant oxygen bottles be shipped? Ever see that? The trucks are fascinating. It's amazing these people. I saw one time the driver, their bottles about this tall, they weigh 200 pounds, they're made of steel, they're acetylene torch bottles, and he rolled the bottles in like this, as easy as walking. And I thought about what it must take to be able to do that. That comes down to their specialization and their ability to do all of those things together. The other part of that is in the downstream environment, a third party can call on many customers, specialize in those customers, and call on them more frequently because that's their business, that's their core. And the independence from any manufacturer gives you two things. You can diversify your outside providers so that you don't solely lean on one group, which is known as a single point of failure if you're designing computer systems. And they can also become an impartial advisor. We tend to listen to ourselves, especially when we're in businesses. One of the more difficult things that you see is that many times we fear asking the hard questions, especially if we work with each other. All right. I watch air disasters. I don't know why I do it. I fly a lot, but I do. And one of the things that they always talk about is cockpit management, the ability for a senior pilot to take advice from a junior pilot, and that has to be done. And so many times the advice could run counter to your own beliefs, but you need it just to be safe. My best friend once told me I had to get out of a business one time because they were going to take everything I had, and he was right. You always, your best friends are the ones that will tell you things you don't want to hear. Okay, so what are the other things that we use when we're trying to decide whether to make or buy? Well, we have two things, and I'll go past this slide. There are capabilities that are considered intangible, which are inherent, and then there are those that are considered tangible. So let's just talk about the intangible ones. The first is what's known as idiosyncratic knowledge. Idiosyncratic knowledge, if you've heard this person has an idiosyncrasy, that's what idiosyncratic knowledge means, okay? It is a specialized knowledge that I cannot use in any other function. But in that one instance, it is invaluable without peer and priceless. Someone who has a strong ability, such as being able to tune a piano. How do you take that? Who has perfect pitch in their head? You can assume other music, but very few other things. I had a friend of mine who had two left feet. His name was Donnie Davis, but he was the most natural baseball player I ever saw in my life. He was a great shortstop, killer. He actually tried out for the Cardinals, hit two ground rule doubles, rolled into a double play, and they said, "Sorry, you're too old. You're 26." That's just, some people have this weird thing, okay? And that's what an idiosyncratic knowledge is. The next is relationships. Some relationships are so valued and important that no matter how you do or you could do in the make situation, this connection that you have with distributor personnel is so good, and their ability to solve problems is so valued that it negates your reason to go try into the make situation. If you are invested in just-in-time manufacturing, where things are like a kabuki dance, where things have to be stylized and performed in an exact environment, where you start from procurement to processing, to ordering, to creating, to distributing, to delivering, to adding to the floor. You have so many different plates that have to be put into play that your connections to your channel partners are more important than ever. And then finally, there's brand equity. So a manufacturer's brand name can be so strong that it is irrelevant to the consumer how your goods get to them. Apple, truthfully. I mean, Apple could be in so many other stores. You might get an idea of the total amount of the market in terms of consumable PCs and everything. You know what the total market that's handled by the Macs? Want to guess? About 8%. Apple only owns about 8% of the market, but they generate 35% of revenues on their apples, and that's the way they like it. Okay, their brand equity is so strong they don't need to be in any other places. They're doing just fine the way they are. So the intangibles. The next is the tangibles. An important asset can be the physical facilities that you own. And so if you're able to custom fit facilities for some unique environment, this is very valuable. Coors before the 80s was only sold west of the Mississippi River. And the reason why is that Coors is cold filtered and it is never stored warm. If you like Coors, okay? I actually went there one time too, Golden, Colorado. That 98% of the grain and mash that they use for baking Coors is given to the farmers around Colorado. They say they have the happiest cows in the world. So anyway, transaction-specific facilities. The next is dedicated capacity. If you have a capability that you have sheltered and created for a given manufacturer, it also means that you have some slack, that you have some extra there. The difficulty with that also is that sometimes the demands from your partner get to be huge. So at some point, Amazon asked FedEx in 2021, whenever COVID was hitting, they wanted to have 2/3 to 3/4 of the capacity of Cincinnati's airport to store their goods. And FedEx said, "Are you crazy? You would basically shove out a vast majority of our customers if you did that." And Amazon said, "Hey, we're Amazon. We could ask anything." And FedEx said, "Forget it." And now, of course, Amazon is in deliveries now. And now FedEx has kind of redesigned themselves as number 3. Another is I'm getting trouble with the word specificity. I don't know why I have a problem, okay? You might need the functions at a very particular location, which may be less suited to the needs of other manufacturers. So I took a drive, and I am, as Director of Professional Education, I am focusing on the Conover and Newton area. And if you've ever driven through there, I was stunned by the number of mills, factories, furniture makers, leather manufacturers, polyethylene, you name it, that is out there, and you never even see it. And when you look at that as a manufacturing area, there's very specific. They have, in essence, what we call fixed or hard industries in that location. May not be the best place to put a supermarket distributor there, but given that, they have very special needs and they take care of them quite well. So these are tangible and intangible capabilities that we use to determine whether or not to make the make or buy decision. We also have to worry about the environmental uncertainty. Are we in good times or bad times? That's a difficult question to ask. The last 2 years, of course, if you want to use this as an example, a highly volatile market is what we've been through. When they talk about, here we go again, low specificity, what they mean is how unique are the products that you sell. Can you find those very same products in other locations and within a distribution area? Low specificity means is that whatever your industry is or your field, you carry the same things that everyone else does. In a volatile situation, you want to keep yourself fast and loose. You want to outsource. You do not want to make the difficult decision of committing so many resources to making this choice. And so the choice is, if you're just a warehouse, you're in a volatile market, the proper reaction is to outsource and stay that way. You got to wait till everything clears up. But volatile markets do have opportunities. So it is a truism that more businesses are started during recessions than they are during recoveries. One of those reasons why is there's an investment in human capital that is not working anywhere else. And the entrepreneurial spirit, especially when you're having to pay bills, can motivate individuals to invest and not surprisingly be successful. If you do something that is highly specific, if you're a unique organization, let's go back to tuning pianos again. Let's perhaps say that you only work on Steinways, and Steinways are big in the area that you're at, and your knowledge is so unique and special that people seek you out. If the market is promising, you integrate to gain control of the employees. Avoid small numbers bargaining. There's a very good possibility you could take over the entire market if you act fast. And then, of course, if the market is less promising, there's no reason to enter. Volatility makes you cautious, but it doesn't make you crawl into a ball. It just means that you have to think better, okay? So I said that the major reasons why you move to the make is to be able to increase your return on investment. That's the primary reason, but there are other reasons as well. Many times, you simply do not know how well you're doing with your end users. It's very difficult on social media because who generally gets on social media to talk about a product? What are they usually doing? Yeah, criticize. All right. So you really can't use social media as a judge. And the difficulty with also that is so many accounts are fake that you don't even know if they're shills or not. So, I mean, social media is not a way of really judging, even though we do social media all the time. We just don't have enough information. And sometimes the need is so important that we create vertical markets to reduce this performance ambiguity because we don't know how well we're performing. So the record industry, to go along with my discussion before, in the 90s, because the service supplied was less than the service demanded, was having a slump in the 90s. Record sales were down. The record industry wasn't sure how to solve it. For some reason, nobody ever thought about marketing research. And so what they did was they manipulated that one P of the four Ps that's the easiest, and they dropped prices. It was an unmitigated disaster. It didn't fix the problem. That's not the reasons why consumers were not buying. They weren't buying because they couldn't get the one song that they wanted. And so the failure of the record industry in the 90s is because they didn't know what customers wanted. If they would have vertically marketed down, or if they'd have done more market research, they would have understood consumers better. This is the second reason, is also to learn from customers. I talked about Luxottica, I think maybe 2 days ago, or maybe earlier than that. Luxottica, which is a French company, bought LensCrafter because they wanted to understand consumers in the United States better. It was a disaster. Once again, I always talk about you learn more from failure than you do from success. Makes me start the smartest guy in the world. What happened is that the corporate culture within Luxottica just didn't jive with the LensCrafter, and it just didn't work out. Many times when organizations buy others, you find cultures that just simply can't live together, and there has to be some amicable way of breaking up. And that's what happened. Hardee's and Wendy's merged together. This was a decade and a half ago. And the first thing that Hardee's wanted to do is do away with the Wendy's name. And Wendy's, as a corporation, the people within it revolted. They weren't Hardee's, they were Wendy's. And it was led actually by Wendy herself, Dave Thomas's daughter, who owned 27 franchises in Ohio, who led it. And so learning from customers is valued and important. Sometimes, however, the best way is not buying it. So you also find failures when you're trying to do it the other way. See, here once again, the lesson I want to teach again is that there's really got to be good reasons why you vertically integrate. But there's great reasons out there if you can find them. The biggest issue with integrating, though, a vertical integration is quite simply it requires specialized knowledge that you may not have. And so Intermarché is a French grocery company. They wanted to integrate backward into food production, but they were to grocery store owners. It meant that they had to learn the business of how to make shelf-stable foods. And that is a science and an art. And even though you buy in, it doesn't mean that you understand it. What it meant also was that Intermarché spent way too much time trying to understand an industry that they never wanted to understand that much. They just wanted to simply do more. And it ultimately failed them. So once again, there has to be solid reasons for doing this integration. So let me wrap this up in conclusion. I'll let you get in your groups in a second. Just remember this. The vertical market begins at the base of outsourcing. You begin with that choice and must find reasons why vertically integrating is attractive. We assume that the market has many participants and all of the functions have to be performed when you take over a vertical market. Remember, rule 1 from chapter 1 is that you can have different members performing the functions, but all the functions have to be performed. And if you're doing it in a vertical environment, you have to do everything. Just remember that over time, company-specific tangible assets many times become more valued. And so sometimes just holding on is all you really want to do, and that can bring success, okay? Performance ambiguity requires organizations to monitor all around. So, in conclusion, as I've stated over and over again, the make or buy choice, start with a buy, work to the make. And remember the 6 fundamental advantages for the outside specialist, all right? Okay, so with that being said, let's end this.